Hey, it's Jacob. I'm the guy in the green shirt. Right there. And I, along with 14 other students and 3 wonderful group leaders, affectionately referred to by our group as adults, was in a group that traveled to St. Lucia going into 2022. The focus of our abroad was outdoor leadership in context, but we represent a diverse group of majors and minors. Here are the numbers. But we're even more than the diversity of majors. We represent a diversity of thought and cultures that provided unique perspectives in the work we did throughout our time together. The members of our trip were...
Hey, I'm Matthew.
Hey, I'm Sammy.
Hey, I'm Sean.
Hi, I'm Gabe Keeley.
Hi, I'm Grace.
Hi, I'm Jay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Caroline.
Hi, I'm Dana.
Hey, I'm Boone.
Hi, I'm Elliot.
Hey, I'm Candace.
Hi, I'm Marlena.
Hi, I'm Delaney.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
Hey, I'm Chandler.
Hi, I'm Mary Jane.
And you're going to be hearing from them during this presentation. But now, I'll be turning it over to Elliot to give you some more context about the places that framed our work.
St. Lucia is an island in the East Caribbean and is about 642 miles from Venezuela. It has a land area of 238 square miles with a population of about 185,000 people. The 2 closest islands to it are Martinique to the north and St. Vincent to the south. St. Lucia was colonized by both the French and English. The impact of both these cultures is shown in language, food, education, architecture, dance, and other areas. Also, it is important to mention now tourism and the large role it plays in St. Lucia's economy. Most of the population of St. Lucia is employed by the tourism or hospitality industry. We arrived at the Vieux Fort Airport and went through COVID screening and customs. Then we boarded a taxi, which was a large bus, one of the largest land vehicles we traveled in during the whole trip, and headed north towards Denneries. Then we continued northwest to Castries and then on to Rodney Bay. The central area of the island is moderately mountainous and forested. The coasts are less forested and more developed. There are several large banana farms spread throughout the island, and many taxi trips took us past these. Rodney Bay is one of the largest tourist centers in St. Lucia, and it was where we called home for the entire trip.
The basic roadmap of our presentation will follow this basic structure. The first group will introduce context and contemporary culture and heritage, followed by our outdoor leadership, then the personal and professional learning, and ending with a summative conclusion of our learning. The next group is contemporary culture and heritage. This group will explore influencing factors on the current culture. Tourism is connected to environmentalism, which is connected to the education system, and then connects to colonialism. These interconnected aspects all work together to create a contemporary culture, which this group will explain. We invite you to come relive this experience with us. We hope you enjoy.
Through our country studies course, we began to understand culture through the iceberg analogy. This meant that we were expecting to experience culture on a surface level as well as deep level. While in country, every day was heavily saturated with different instances of surface and deep culture. To capture as many of the moments and themes as possible, we have organized our gleanings into 6 subthemes: tourism, environmentalism, education, colonialism, gender/sexism, and food. There's the tourism side of the island and there's the people side of the island. This gets at my finding that the island is a very polarized place. The areas that are meant for tourism or benefit from tourism are very developed and wealthy compared to the villages and other spots on the island. The appreciation mentioned from an earlier part of my journal hints at a discovery made through learning about a restaurant on Cos and Bos Beach. Marjorie's restaurant has been on Cos and Bos Beach for over 30 years. but during this time has been challenged by tourism efforts and a golf course that has been trying to buy the land and push out Marjorie's restaurant. Since we know her struggle and challenges with tourism, we can appreciate the 30-year-old restaurant far more because of its context.
One of the most influential place-based contexts for much of the group on the trip was seeing how gender and sexism was approached in St. Lucia. I was especially struck by how differently the men versus the women in our group were treated by a variety of St. Lucian people. Every single woman in the group, including our leading faculty, went through extreme catcalling and many marriage proposals during our time in country, by not only men on the street, but also from some of the professionals we interacted with as well. Contrary to this, when the Bay Gardens management gave us a presentation about their business and the values they uphold, it was interesting to see how emphasis on gender equality varies from other groups on the island, as they are a fully female management team that puts specific focus on equality with their employees. While the many experiences we had with gender and sexism during our time in country were unfortunate, they played a vital role in understanding what day-to-day life is like in St. Lucia. St. Lucia is an extremely bountiful country in terms of flora, biodiversity, and how much the environment provides for culture and daily life. All of the tour guides and professionals we interacted with spoke extremely highly of St. Lucia's environment and the actions taken by both the government and the people to continue to protect it. For example, the first tour guide company we worked with, Sea Spray St. Lucia Tours, specifically used cups completely made out of recycled plastic to do their part in protecting the island. One lesson that really stands out is when we learned about the relationship between Rastafarians and the environment, with how important using all natural materials and methods for everyday tasks such as hair washing or brushing teeth are.
St. Lucia's many cultural influences can best be experienced with the certain local dishes that are the clearest example of St. Lucia's status as a cultural melting pot. Many takeaway places will load up a to-go container with rice, spaghetti, a meat of choice, boiled root vegetables, cheesy potatoes, etc. until you are walking away with a smorgasbord of flavors. The national dish of St. Lucia is definitely a highlight for pretty much everyone on the trip. Salt fish with green plantains, basically overripe bananas that are boiled in salt water until they more closely resemble potatoes. St. Lucia also draws upon many well-established food staples like eggs, yogurt, and small pastries for breakfast, expanding into burgers and rotis and other easy-to-make, easy-to-eat sandwiches. For snacks, many people rely on local fruit produce, often picking it off of trees or finding it in supermarkets. The lasting effects of colonialism can certainly be felt, but more pressing than that are the effects of neocolonialism. It is abundantly clear how strong the economic influences from outside regions are on St. Lucia. The UK, America, the Greater West Indies, Hong Kong and China, as well as certain former predominantly white UK colonies like South Africa, Canada, and Australia all dip their toes in the St. Lucian economy. Globalism has certainly sequestered St. Lucia into certain roles economically, like tourism, because of how much infrastructure and economic developments it needs to compete on a global scale. Many of the holdovers of colonialism are things like the culture, the city structure and layout, architecture, government, transportation services, as well as sporting matches.
Outdoor leadership was a major learning point of our trip. This group is going to explain what outdoor leadership is and how it was applied. They will provide contributing aspects like outdoor leadership core competencies, educational versus recreational context, and highlighting examples of our outdoor leadership in our St. Lucian guides and their impact on our group.
So what is outdoor leadership? Our outdoor leadership book defines outdoor leadership as the practice of leading individuals and groups into natural settings via a variety of modes of transportation. But what does it really mean to us? As we spent more time in St. Lucia, we were able to construct our own definition of outdoor leadership based on our own experiences. Themes of outdoor leadership that our group developed were effective group facilitation towards a common goal, establishing a connection with the environment, meaning making, attention to the core competencies, and the ability to be flexible to group or environmental needs and changes.
A major concept that was repeatedly referred to throughout the trip in St. Lucia was the core competencies of outdoor leadership. So what are they and what do they mean? There are 8 core competencies and include foundational knowledge, self-awareness, professional conduct, decision-making and judgment, teaching and facilitation, environmental stewardship, program management, safety and risk management, and technical ability. And to be a successful leader, you want to consider each of these competencies and how they can be incorporated into activities you plan. For example, if you're leading a hike, you want to consider the safety and risk management and environmental stewardship core competencies while planning the activity so that when leading the activity, you're well prepared. A task that we did almost every day in our daily journals was to identify core competencies that we saw in the tour guides we interacted with, leaders in the St. Lucia community that spoke with us, and so on. This not only helped us familiarize ourselves with the core competencies, but also gave us concrete examples of how these core competencies show up in outdoor leadership.
So hopefully by now you get the nitty-gritty about what outdoor leadership is. Let's dive into the 2 contexts that we experienced while abroad. The first being outdoor leadership in a recreational context. What does this mean? Is it that we're just doing vacation activities? Recreational context is the ability to engage with the natural environment and be active, including all adventure levels. Ways that we experienced this was while zip-lining through the forest, hiking up the Gros Piton, snorkeling and getting to see the native fish, coral, and plants, and sea kayaking along the coast and river. To sum it up, we were active in a natural scape.
The second context is outdoor leadership through an educational lens. Environmental education was the most prominent mode we experienced abroad, which is learning about the environment and our role as leaders while engaging with a natural classroom. We had the opportunity to learn about St. Lucia's environment during nature trail hikes, aerial tram rides, and snorkeling. We were able to understand the role of environmental ethics and environmental stewardship in outdoor leadership and the importance of making sure that we are ethically engaging with natural places and leaving them the way we found them or even better.
So we experienced outdoor leadership everywhere we went, especially from tour guides who demonstrated core outdoor competencies such as foundational knowledge of leading a group into a tour, or high-risk activities such as ziplining, or environmental stewardship expressed by tour guides during nature hikes. Outdoor leadership was also demonstrated by Stephanie, Chandler, and Mary Jane in day-to-day activities. In addition to tour guides and our abroad program leaders, we each had an opportunity to be a leader of the day. As leaders of the day, we led inspirationals in the morning. We were also in charge of managing the group and facilitating group decision-making for the day. This included making sure the entire group was ready on time to be picked up by taxis and be taken to our scheduled activities, communicating with tour guides and Steph, and getting to see the behind scenes of planning an outdoor activity for a medium-sized group in a completely different environment and country.
On our kayaking day, we experienced a tour guide with a different facilitation style than what we had experienced up until then. He had a great knowledge of St. Lucia and its environment. He is especially knowledgeable in how the tourism industry affects the function of nature. He also had some core competencies of outdoor education that he demonstrated through the activity, like foundational knowledge, technical skills, and environmental stewardship. He greatly lacked self-awareness and professional conduct, teaching and facilitation, and safety and risk management. His communication style greatly differed from the groups and the communication that we had gotten used to in the country, and that led us to a miscommunication problem throughout the activity. He also lacked awareness of group needs, especially when it came to providing instructions on how to kayak, the route directions, and the necessary cautions we would consider while kayaking. These and other small things ended up negatively influencing our experience on that day. What this taught us, however, is the importance of reflection on our own facilitation style and doing your best to encompass all of these core competencies in order to have a successful experience for your participants. Additionally, if you have a core competency that needs work, try to acknowledge that it is lacking and try to make it better.
So So let's talk about the guides that we interacted with on our excursions. A private boating company that we took a whale watching tour with was Hackshaw's. They specialize in the ecotourism sector to allow people to get the opportunity to see the natural beauties and animals that make up St. Lucia. Hackshaw's places emphasis on being environmentally friendly by knowing how to properly interact with whales and dolphins. These guides know that being on a boat can sometimes be uncomfortable for people, so they demonstrated risk management, one of the core competencies. They were always aware of where everyone was on the boat to make sure that no one went overboard, covered the rules of being on the boat, how to use life jackets, and checked in on everyone periodically while offering food.
The next group is personal and professional learning. We all grew in so many different ways during this trip. Lindsay is going to provide a personal experience of her connection to nature, Matthew will address aspects of metaphysical growth, and Dana will talk about elements of professional growth.
Being immersed in nature daily on this abroad, our group couldn't help but find powerful lessons in the beautiful world around us. Personally, while in St. Lucia, one of my biggest takeaways came from observing the natural world around me. After days of snorkeling with vibrant fish and smiling at the tiny hummingbirds and geckos, about halfway through our trip, I was struck by the magnitude of the lessons we, humans, can learn from animals. While on our whale watching tour, a special moment took place. One member of our group spotted a pod of dolphins, and we drove the boat right up next to the sweet creatures. Apparently, dolphins really love to ride the water in front of the boats because it propels them forward even faster as they swim. So, as our boat flew through the water, dolphins kept swimming up to the bow of our catamaran, jumping through the ocean spray and clearly playing with the bolstered speed. There seemed to be hundreds of dolphins everywhere. They just kept coming. As our group experienced the dolphins play from only feet away, I reflected on what I could learn from the dolphins. Immediately, I was inspired by a page in Miss Setti's writings, where she shares what she calls qualities of thought that can be seen through the various beasts of the field. I began to consider the spiritual qualities that I could learn from the dolphins, qualities that could last with me beyond the experience on the boat. It was clear to me that the sweet dolphins were a pure expression of God, an exuberance, spontaneity, zeal, inclusivity, joy, grace, meekness, and more. Throughout the remainder of the trip, I was encouraged by these dolphins to recognize and be grateful for the qualities I was noticing in nature around me. I also strove to express those same qualities I was seeing in my own living and loving while on the trip as well. Some other highlights with God's creatures that our group noted included lots and lots of snorkeling with parrotfish, squid, octopus, flounder, swimming across an open water channel lined with starfish, hiking Gross Piton with birds and geckos, finding all the stray dogs and cats on the island to love, and learning about rainforest wildlife on our treetop adventure.
One focus of the trip was spiritual engagement and faith formation. Optional Bible lessons to mentally prepare ourselves for the day, daily inspiration to set the tone, and Wednesday night services to share demonstrations and healings were some of the ways we did this. Testimonies were very important to many members of the trip, and the healings shared during them were inspirational. We'll now briefly share a few from select group members.
Hi, this is Sammy. I had a really great healing of my ear being clogged while snorkeling from listening to Sean's Wednesday night readings.
I was healed of all symptoms of COVID by re-examining the belief using the court case in Science and Health.
I was healed of extreme fatigue and dehydration by working with Matthew and the daily prayer.
If there are any healings you'd like to hear more about, feel free to reach out to members of the group and ask them afterwards. Each morning we opened with an inspirational activity to set the tone for the day and practice positivity. We often shared gratitude for one another, unpacked deep and meaningful quotes, and identified actions we could take to benefit the group. We'll now have each group member share a few words to give an example of a met. First question, what is one word you would use to describe the group?
Inclusive.
Supportive. Adventurous.
Spunky.
Dynamic.
Resilient.
Inclusiveness.
Uplifting.
Hysterical.
Rejuvenating.
Creative.
What is one word that describes your growth on the trip?
Inquisitive.
Proactivity.
Prepared.
Independence.
Openness.
Advocacy.
Patience.
Embracing.
Adventurous.
Confidence.
Love.
Intercultural awareness.
We did so many amazing things in St. Lucia. From mountain peaking to boat rides to ziplining, our days were filled with adventure. But since we were there to study outdoor leadership, we were also tasked with approaching each activity from a professional lens. The primary way that we observed outdoor leadership in action was through our guides. All of our tourism activities, from the more relaxed to the highly adventurous, were led by St. Lucian outdoor professionals. As outdoor leaders ourselves, we all found great value in turning to our guides for questions and advice about their field. Most of our guides had been in the industry for years, so they were incredibly capable and knowledgeable, hitting those outdoor leadership core competencies with ease. There are plenty of us in the group who have experience as camp counselors, or sport team leaders, or some other leadership experience in the outdoor world. There are some of us even interested in entering the outdoor leadership field professionally. But even for those of us who aren't interested in pursuing outdoor leadership as a career, the skills that we practiced on this trip were crucial for our professional development. We learned about time management and how to navigate a culture where island time undermines punctuality. As individual leaders of the day, we learned how to stay calm under pressure and lead a group with confidence. And as visitors in a foreign country, we learned how to be empathetic towards a culture different from our own. And the best part is, all of this learning is distilled in our journals, which chronicled our progress throughout our journey.
Lastly, we will conclude by a few members providing their most influential experiences from the trip.
All in all, it's safe to say that every member of our group learned and grew a lot during our time in St. Lucia. Our growth was multifaceted and arguably exceeded the just under 3 weeks we spent in country. As we reflect, we are filled with immense gratitude for each other, the experience, and everyone who made the trip possible. We'll conclude by going back over some key experiences different group members reflected upon after returning to campus.
So my definition of outdoor leadership changed a lot while I was on the trip. I originally went in with understanding that it was basically just leading people in the outdoors, and my other definition was from the book, and it didn't really make sense to what I kind of understood about being in the outdoors. It was just leading people through modes of transportation, but through a lot of firsthand experiences at the end of the trip, I came to my own definition that really made sense to me, which was challenging the people in our group to an appropriate level, so it's pushing them out of their comfort zone and allowing them to learn, and a leader just knows their group.
Something that I noticed that emerged in our work and our definitions of outdoor leadership was the presence of the 8 core competencies. I think because it was so present in the language we were using throughout our time in St. Lucia, that it was pretty natural that it would kind of emerge in our definitions at the end of the trip. But what I noticed about it was there was kind of these 2 tracks that emerged. So one track was the use of the competencies as kind of an extension of what we already had. So we had, our first round of definitions that emerged, and then the 8 core competencies were added into as kind of like an inclusionary thing. But the second track that I wasn't expecting, and something that changed in me specifically, was the competencies were a good foundation to start building my definition and rebuilding it during my work. And so the second track that emerged was this, okay, so given these competencies, how do we effectively lead? And how does our definition of outdoor leadership get affected by the competencies that are in play? And which ones am I good at? Which ones am I not good at? And it's kind of these 2 tracks that are equally valid, but were so significant in our work. And I think it's really going to change for either definition.
One of my most significant learning opportunities on the trip was exploring myself and my educational leading tendencies. One of the things that I didn't realize before this trip is that my tendencies and leadership style in leadership and educational opportunities is that I tended to step back in an authoritative role. What I thought was the reason for that is to instill trust and ownership over learning from my peers and for my students. But in fact, that just ended up making my leadership style less effective. So what I had learned is that the subconscious reason for me stepping back in an authoritative role was actually a fear of not being liked, which was really interesting because it actually made my leadership technique less effective. And that's never something that I realized before this trip. So this trip was really expansive to me in more ways than just educational and cultural, but really expansive personally. And one of the most important and crucial goals of outdoor leadership to me is encouraging self-exploration and self-actualization. And that's exactly what this trip helped me do, was find out more about myself and more confidence in what I want to do.
So I'm going to talk about my experience on my Leader of the Day designated day, which was a day in which myself and my co-leader led a kayaking expedition with a group called Dive Fair Helen, which was a local kayaking and diving company. And going into the day, I was anticipating having to kind of manage the group and make sure that everything was running smoothly, but what I didn't anticipate was actually being responsible for leading the group myself on the expedition. And this changed when we got to the location, and our guide essentially told us that me and my co-leader would be basically leading the group, and he would be more sitting in the back and evaluating / watching us. And while this was a bit jarring at first, I was immediately struck by how supportive the entire group was of me and my co-leader in this position. There was no sense of judgment, even when I ended up making a few wrong turns here and there, or the entire day felt a little more unplanned than it could have if the guide was the one in control. But the entire time I felt completely supported by my group, and it ended up being a great opportunity for us to experience a leadership style that we hadn't experienced before, and also a great way for me to put my own leadership abilities into practice, and it showed me that I'm a more capable leader than I sometimes give myself credit for.
We would also like to thank several members from the Principia community for all that they've done for this trip. First, we would like to thank Griff Carlson for his work in putting together this slideshow. We would also like to extend this thank you to Media Services for providing resources for our group throughout this entire process. We would also like to thank the Study Abroad office for making this trip possible and organizing it. We would like to thank the Principia administration for allowing for this wonderful opportunity. And of course, we would like to thank Stephanie, Chandler, Allison, and Mary Jane for chaperoning and providing emotional support across the entire trip. Thank you so much.